Hello there, welcome back to another lazy show here on YouTube as well as on Facebook. I'm glad you are here with me again. Um, so, with the goal, of course, of help you waste less time in AutoCAD, right? So, I'm very excited for today's topic. I'm sure it's gonna save you so much time on your AutoCAD workflow. So before we start, as always, I'm gonna start reading some of your comments, right? I see many comments already on the chat. That's awesome. Very happy for that. And before I read your comments, let me say welcome to our new YouTube member, John Phillips. Thank you, John, for believing on what we do, right? Which is save time in AutoCAD. So you just got access to our CAD meetings, right? We do these CAD meetings once a month, and our next one is gonna be April 30. So yeah. So, and of course, thank you to all of you folks who are on my screen because thanks to you is that I am here doing this live stream. All right, so let me jump to the chat now, read some of your comments before we start today's presentation. We have our friend SHABBIR is on the chat. I think you're new to the show, SHABBIR, because I don't remember your name, but in any case, that means either YouTube or Facebook is recommending our show to more and more people, right? Which is great. So welcome to our live streams here. SHABBIR. SHABBIR says, I'm waiting for your stream. Yeah, my friend. We do these live streams each Sunday at 10 a.m. for people who don't know, and that is Pennsylvania in the United States. So that's the time. So thank you for waiting, SHABBIR. I have something to ask, he says. Sure. SHABBIR is also in the chat and says, can you please make a dynamic block which dynamically allows array parameters to change as well as source object? I sent details below. SHABBIR, that's a great question, and believe it or not, today's live stream is gonna be about dynamic blocks. So yeah, I'm gonna create an awesome dynamic block today. And we'll do that in a moment. So you're asking about arrays and parameters and objects and so on. So that sounds like a complex topic to cover like in a short time, right? So why don't you share the details in an email? So all of my information is on my YouTube channel. So you can do that, and that way I can take a look with examples. So let me show you my information over here. So you can simply go to the page, go to the about, and you will have my email over here and all of my information. So yeah, so that's what I'll suggest. SHABBIR, email me your information, and maybe we can pick it for a lazy question, right? Because we have this show also, the lazy question for people who don't know. We have 3 episodes so far, and it's about picking one of your questions and answer you live, right? So yeah, SHABBIR, so share the details with me on the email, so that way I can go ahead and take a look at it, right? And maybe do a video, a live stream about it. SHABBIR says, create a big size rectangle covering the whole block. Yes, again, SHABBIR, it would be nice if you share with me the detail as well as some images as what are you trying to achieve exactly. Maybe even sharing your drawing file, right, with your block already, so that way you simplify my life to simply jump on it and figure it out about the array option, and I don't have to waste time thinking, what are you trying to achieve, right? So yeah, that's my recommendation, SHABBIR. We're all about saving time here. So our friend Duke says, hello all. Hello, my friend Duke. Happy to have you here again. As always, that's awesome that you keep up with the live streams. SHABBIR is saying hi to Douglas. So I'm not the only one waiting here. Thank you. Yeah. Let me simplify. A dynamic block containing an array with a. I think I already answered you, SHABBIR, what the steps are in order to maybe pick this for another lazy question live stream, right? So we have 4 people live so far. That's awesome. I think we are ready to start today's presentation where we're gonna create this awesome block. All right, so as always, if you have questions or suggestions or anything that you want to talk, you can interrupt me at any moment, right, during my presentation, because this is the way I like to do these live streams is to make it interactive, so that way it's not just me talking and talking all the time. So yeah, you can stop me at any moment. All right, guys, let's start. Let me get ready over here on my screen. Let's go over here and all right. So all right. So I wanted to simplify my client life with one of his blocks. In this case, this sync block. So the first thing I did when I received this block was some of its limitations, right? This was a static sync block that my client wanted to insert, and probably, I'm guessing he wanted to place it exactly in the corner, but as you can see, it's not really exactly placed. And again, this is because it's a static regular block. Now my client wanted also some additional useful things, like for instance showing the size of his sink and more things like that. So the way I started it was, of course, like in this show, we never want to start from scratch. I simply copy his block to the side over here and rotated it, of course, because when we create dynamic blocks, it's always try to have the block on the correct angle or rotation. So over here, what I did is simply explode this block, right, really quick using the explode command, and I had simply single lines like so. So now what I did is, of course, selected all of my geometry, make sure following some standards, good standards when creating blocks. Layer 0, always all of your items. Color by layer, that's fine, by layer, and so on. So what I did is simply create this block again, right, using the block command. I call this lazy block, sorry, lazy sync, and simply make sure I had checked the open in block editor, so that way I could immediately select my base point. Now the base point had to be a very strategic position, right, because here, for instance, my client has his base point on the center. Again, this doesn't allow to him to place the sink exactly on corners. So this way, what I did then is place my base point over here in this corner, like so. So one of the first things I want to implement on this block is the ability to automatically align the sink block to a specific wall angle. So what I did then is I utilized a parameter here in AutoCAD called the alignment parameter. So this way I could simply select that and click a location on my screen, in this case the base point of my block, and then move to the side and click again like so. So this way when I tested my block, right, and I could maybe simulate some of the walls over here. So this way whenever I placed my block like so, I could quickly align it to the wall angle like so, or to this other wall also like so, right? So that was one of the first things I implemented. However, there was a problem with this block. Well, so the problem was that what if I wanted to, for instance, place this block on the corner, right? So I could go ahead and place it on this corner easily. However, what happened if I wanted to place it on this other corner over here? I'll have to basically guess, right? And that's not what I want, right? I want a way for my client to quickly place in any corner. So the way I solved this was by introducing another alignment parameter on the opposite corner over here. So I simply place it and located it like so. So this way, when my client wanted to, let's say, insert his block, let me quickly draw something over here. So when my client wanted to insert his block, right? So for instance, using this block palette, that's the same block, he could insert it on one corner, or also if he wanted to insert it on the other corner, he could simply use the control key on his keyboard, and that way he could move his base point and place it exactly on the other corner like so, right? So this will give him the flexibility again to place this block anywhere basically, and with precision. Now, another thing that my client needed, or let's see if we have comments on the chat so far. All we did was simply add a couple of alignment parameters to auto align his sync block with the walls. Not only that, but we also made it so that he could change quickly with the control key on the keyboard between different insertion points, again to give more flexibility to the end user, right? In this case, my client. So let's see if we have questions so far on the chat before we keep moving, right? Let me know. Let's see. Jeff Wellington is says good morning to all. Good morning, Jeff. Thank you for being here with us again on another lazy show, right? Thank you, Wellington. All right, it looks like there is no question so far of what we just did here. So let's keep moving then, guys. With 7 people connected live, that's awesome. All right. So another thing that I wanted to implement on this blog for my client to simplify his life, right, was the ability to change the width of this sink, right? Because in reality, you will never have a one size sink that you need, right? So the way I did it was implementing a linear parameter over here. So following instructions, of course, I needed to specify the start point over here and finally the end point over here, and like so. So there was an exclamation mark that simply means that there is something missing, right? In this case, what is missing is an action in order for this parameter to work properly. So, but before I applied an action, what I did is I simplified this, right? Right now, I had 2 grips, but I needed only one. So let me move this on the side over here. Okay, so I needed only one. So the way I simplified was selecting it and going to the number of grips. So I change it to 1, like so. All right, so now again, this parameter was missing something. That's an action. So the action that I added was the stretch action, and following the instructions again from the command line, which says select parameter. Of course, this is the parameter. Select the associated point. Of course, would be this grip, and then select the stretch frame. So of course would be this side of my sink, like so. And finally select objects. So the objects were all of these objects, like so. So after I tested this parameter and action, right? Because again, another good practice when creating dynamic blocks is you never should start adding one parameter after another one and after another one without testing, because sometimes you might have a problem and you will have a headache trying to figure it out where the problems comes from, right? So that's why I like to test all of these parameters one at a time. So that's what I did, went and tested it, and over here I saw that it was stretching nicely. However, the sink had a problem, and the problem was that the bowl of the sink wasn't keeping centered with the overall sink, right? So the way I fixed it was going again to the block editor and introducing another action to this block, right, in order to keep the bowl center when we stretch it. And the action that I added it was the move action. So I introduced this move action to this dynamic block, and again I selected my parameter, my associated point, and my object would be the bowl, of course, of the sink, like so, right? So again, a good practice is test the block. That's what I did. And after I tested this block, I immediately saw a change. The change was that indeed the bowl of the sink was moving now, but not in the right way or on the way that we want, right? Which was keeping the bowl center with the sink. So what I did to fix this problem was I selected the move action, right, and went to my properties. Over here on the properties, there was a distance multiplier that I had it to 1, but in order to keep this centered in the block, I needed to set it to 0.5. So once I did that, I immediately saw that now whenever I stretched the sink, the bowl will now keep center also. So before we proceed, let me jump to the chat and let's see if you have questions so far to this point. Again, I'm just trying to share what I did for my client, right? Because I think his time is important, but your time is also important. So that's why I'm sharing this. Hopefully it's gonna save you some time. Now, before we continue, Let's see if we have comments. Wellington is on the chat. Douglas says, morning, Jeff. So let me know, guys, if there is questions till this point or you're good, so we can keep moving with 5 people live. That's great. All right, so I think there's no questions, so I think we're gonna keep moving. All right, so let's close this block editor. And so now that we had our sink the way we wanted, which was stretching or changing the size and keeping our bowl center, we also wanted, or I also wanted for my client, to a way to know the size of the sink, right? So the way I did this, first I tried a field. A field, for people who don't know, is a smart text that could update automatically according to certain parameters. So the first thing I tried was to use a field to show the size of my sink, and of course selecting the object first. I could select the distance parameter, and then going under the distance option, I could go ahead and say OK to insert my field and place it over here, and this way we will have the let me change the text. This way we will have a smart piece of text that will update per the stretch action. Now, there were some limitations with this idea, because even though fields are smart, you will need an extra step in order to update this information, and the extra step was to regenerate your drawing each time you stretch your block. So that was a limitation, and I wanted to have this information to update live, right? So immediately, without any responsibility from my client to do anything at all, right? I didn't want to him remembering, oh, I need to regenerate my drawing. So the way I did it then was I utilized a different approach. And the approach that I utilized was using a dimension. So I utilized a dimension, and I, of course, added it to the same size of my sink, like so. Again, nothing different. This is a regular dimension so far, but this dimension was better than the field for this specific case, because whenever, of course, I added this dimension, but I needed to also include this dimension on the stretch action, right, in order to work. So the way I included it was simply right click on the stretch action and say modify selection set, and this way I could go ahead and select the same frame of stretch and simply add or select again the, in this case, the new dimension, right? So that's all I did, and this way when I tested the block, I could have a size of the sink, but in real time. Like, I didn't have to regenerate my drawing at all to see the changes. I could immediately see the real size of my sink, right? So this was awesome again. But as you can see, there were some problems with the dimension, with how they display and so on. Not only that, but my client also needed some extra information on the not only the size, right? So the way I did this was then going to the block editor again, and what I did is simply select the dimension, right, and of course change some of its information from the property palette. In this case, the first thing I changed was the text height. It was very big, so 1.5 inches was the approximated right height for my text. And then another thing that I did was turning off some of the properties of this dimension. For instance, the arrows. So I set those to none. So that way I only will start seeing the text. Another thing I did turn off was the dim line 1 and dim line 2, as well as the extension lines, right? We will only need the text from this dimension. So now, then of course I needed to place my text on the correct location. So this was a little tricky because if I just simply move it around, it will cause some issues with the block. So I had to be careful over here. And the way I fixed this issue with the dimension was simply hover over the grip, and I said, so I did set center vertically. So that's what I selected. And this way I could have my text placed exactly on the middle without altering or messing up with the dimension again, which will cause problems inside a block, right? So the last thing I added to my dimension was the name of the block, right? In this case, I went to the option over here that says dim suffix, and I added the word sink, right? Not only that, but sorry. So yeah, so I added that information, and of course, without moving to the next step, before moving to the next step, I went ahead and tested the block to see if there were some problems or issues, right? But again, the block was working nicely. Again, updating the size and the information of the sink live, right, without any input from my client, such as regenerating a drawing to update its information, right? Now, there was still a problem with the block, with the sink block, and I wanted to simplify my client's life even further, right? So, but giving him this block with unlimited sizes, right, was problematic. As you can see, my client will have so many options like this, and that's not right, right? So the way I simplified this block even further was by setting some standard sizes for this block, right? So the way I did it was, but before we move into the next step, let's see if we have questions or comments on the chat, right? So let's see. We have a comment on the chat is Walking on Sunshine. Is our friend Rachel. Hi, Rachel. Thank you for being here with us on again, right? That's awesome that you keep up with the live streams. So happy to have you here, Rachel. So let me know if you have questions so far before we move on with this awesome dynamic blog, which I call the lazy sink. So yeah. All right, so let's see if we have questions. With 7 people connected live, that's awesome. Let's see. No questions. All right. So that's good. So that means we're been doing a good job explaining each step here. So that's awesome. Okay, let's keep moving. Let's wrap this up. So, again, in order to solve this problem of unlimited sizes, right, of sink, what I did is selected the parameter, the distance one parameter, and went to my property. And the first thing I changed was the distance name. In this case, I changed it for width, right, to simplify this information so my client understand easily all of these parameters. So this will be the width. And then another thing that I did was so I went and changed the parameter value. Instead of saying distance type none, I changed it to list. And the reason why I changed it to list was because sinks come in some standard sizes, right? You won't have like a 2 feet sink, 2 feet 1 sink, 2 feet 2 sink. That's not how it works. So this way I could have the option to set some values, right? So far we have only the 2 feet width sink, but I could go ahead and after searching some standard sizes or width for sink, I knew that they will also come on a 30 inches width, as well as 36, 48, 60, and 72. So once I added all of these values, I immediately see some changes, which were these lines over here, and I immediately knew that I did it correctly. So now the next time I was ready with this block, so I simply closed and saved the changes to my block. So right, and now the next time that my client wanted to use his sim block or insert sinks in his floor plans, I'm gonna erase this over here. For instance, over here on this restroom, so the next time that he needed to insert his sink, which in this case was the lazy sink, right? He could simply go to his to the block palette and insert his sink, and let's say he needed to insert it all the way in this corner. That's not a problem. He could use the control key and then quickly place his block like so. Not only that, but let's say he had a different restroom layout like this one where he needed a sink. So again, that's not a problem. He could quickly insert his sink and simply align it to the wall and finally stretch his sink accordingly like so, and the information will update automatically. Here we go, guys. I wanted to share this dynamic block I created for a client. Now let me know your thoughts on the chat, and I'm gonna read it. So while you do that, while you jump to the chat, right, to let me know what do you think. I'm gonna, before I forget, I'm gonna copy or upload this blog right to my it's not this one. So I'm gonna so I'm gonna upload or post this blog to my Patreon page before I forget. right? So I'm gonna select this block and simply paste it over here. So yeah, let me know in the chat, guys, what do you think about this dynamic block that we just created it. So here you have it. I'm gonna simply save this. I'm doing this because I forgot to do this one day. So I'm gonna do it really quick. So that's my dynamic sync block. And while you on the chat, let me know what do you think. Right, I'm gonna simply quickly create a post on my Patreon and share this blog with my Patreon supporters. I'm gonna say video and simply go ahead. I'm gonna start reading your comments, guys, soon, but I know sometimes you need more time to leave your questions. So I'm gonna simply post this over here and go ahead and paste some of this information and say AutoCAD dynamic block, and of course add that attachment. Oops, not over there. So I'm gonna start reading your comments, guys, soon. Let me simply do this before I forget. So Patreon dynamic blocks, and the one that we just created was the dynamic sync block. Here we go, and then I can simply oops, I need to add the video URL. Not a problem. I can simply copy that link of today's live stream and patrons only. Yeah. All right. So I'm ready to post this now. All right. Awesome. So far, let me now jump to the chat. So far we have, how many blocks do we have, guys? We have 21 blocks so far on our Patreon page. So that's awesome. All right, so let me jump to the chat before we wrap up today's live stream. Let's see over here. Comments. Okay. We have some comments on the chat with 9 people connected. We have, let's see, 1 second. We have so many comments today. That's awesome. Hey, Rachel, you're late. That's going to cost you. My friend Duke. Yeah, I mean, what's going to cost Rachel, Duke? SHABBIR says, how to align angle dimensions so it moves with geometry, just like you did with distance dimension here. So SHABBIR, the same steps should work also for a angle dimension. So you should try it, and I'm sure it's gonna work also. So, but let us know your findings, right? If you can share it with everybody, that would be awesome too. But I'm sure that it will be the same steps. Because again, all we're doing with the dimension is we're simply stretching the dimension from one of its grips or origin, of one of its grips or points, and we're simply stretching it, right? But by hiding some of its properties like the dim lines, arrows, and so on, it gives us the impression that it is a text, but in reality it's simply a dimension. But yeah, Felicia Hernandez says, good morning, Lazy Arquitecto, bien con las transmisiones en vivo, bendiciones. Hello, Felicia. Sé que hablas español. Estoy feliz de que estés con nosotros. So for people who don't know, Spanish is my first language because I'm originally from Peru in South America. So gracias, Felicia Hernandez. Walking on Sunshine says, working, Douglas, working. Girl, although it's Sunday, you need at least one day off. I mean, that's the thing, right? Some people have a day off maybe on Sundays, Saturdays, or it depends, right? So here in the US, most of the time, we have a day off Saturdays and Sundays. I don't know how it's in other countries. SHABBIR says, in the first insert block, will change size in both directions or one only? It depends. SHABBIR, you can set it up for one way, for both ways. The steps are the same steps that I just went over, but that's a good question. Walking on Sunshine says, I've done similar with cross-section of footpath, but didn't think to add the dims to the block. Yeah, I mean, so you can do that, my friend. So this way it's a live change, right? You don't have to add an extra step, which was refreshing or regenerating your blog, right? This change is live, basically. So that's the beauty of this technique, right? So again, you can implement it not only on sync blocks, right? You can implement it on many different applications, like Rachel is saying, on cross sections of footpaths. Yeah, Rachel, so thank you for your comment. Our friend Douglas says, dynamic blocks are huge, big time saver, especially once one has a big library of them. That's correct, my friend Duke. So dynamic blocks, if you use them appropriately, following some standards, of course, are going to be very beneficial. However, there is this opposite side also, that if you use it incorrectly, it can give you big headaches. So just to give you some examples, if you create them incorrectly, you won't be able to change to the correct colors, change to the correct layers, change the line type of your block. You will have problems with that, again, if you don't follow good standards, right? We did a video about that, following AutoCAD standards when creating blocks, so, or best practices, I meant. So you should be careful with that also, especially if you create your block and more people are going to use your blocks, right? If you use your block yourself, then it's okay. But if you're working on a team and everybody uses your block, that can cause a lot of problems. So Walking on Sunshine, we have 12 people connected live. That's awesome, guys. We're increasing our number of people. That's awesome. Rachel says, is it possible to create a dialog box specifically for dynamic blocks created rather than have the generic block library? Create a dialog box specifically for dynamic blocks. Yes, Rachel, the easiest way to do that is simply using the tool palette, right? If you don't like, for some reason, the blocks palette, which I love, you can use the tool palette, right? With Control 3, you can open it. It's right here, tool palette. You can create a palette by simply right-clicking on it and say New Palette, and name it as you wish, and simply add your block to the palette. Of course, here it says that it's not found. It's because we didn't save this drawing, right? So I'm gonna save the drawing, and then you will be able to drag it to the palette, right, and have only dynamic blocks over here. Again, we did a video about it also on the channel. You can, if you want to take a look at it, there are all of the details, but to simplify, this is how you do it, right, with the tool palettes. So great question, Rachel. And Sanil Kumar says, hi Douglas. Kumar is also in the chat. For angle dimension, same steps doesn't work because angle remains same between two lines, so they don't move like the distance dimensions. I tried. All right, so thank you for sharing your findings, Shabbir. But again, if you can email me the information, some pictures or screenshots, even your blog, that will simplify my life, right? And kind of get into that and trying to figure it out. So that's what the channel is about, right? It's not about creating more work for everybody. It's about simplifying things. And if you do that, Shabbir, that would be a nice way to simplify my life. So, but thank you, Shabbir, for sharing your findings. Michael says, hey, Sunil, I love that you guys are starting to not only interact with me now, but between you. So that's great. That's a great thing, because it means now that as a community, we are growing, right? Because now you not only will come here for the content or for me, but also for all for other folks that are on the chat that you can interact. That's awesome. Says Xavier says, sir, you press control to align in opposite corner. My question is, if you increase size now, block will remain on perfect position or not? Block will remain on perfect position or not? I'm not understanding your question. Maybe if you can expand on your question, Xavier. Michael says, wow, we have so many questions today. That's awesome. So we're about to wrap this up, guys, because again, I'm very hungry, as always, and I didn't have breakfast, so need to go and so I'm gonna start reading some of your last comments before we wrap this up. Just very regimented and good filling system is a must with blocks. That's right, Duke. Finally got back on having internet issues. Can we add a second sink using the array command? Yes, we can do that, Wellington. And we did a video about our arrays in dynamic blocks, so you can check that out after this video, or I might put it on the end screen also for you, but we already did that. Xavier says, I have noted your email. I will share my blogs. Awesome. I do glad we are on the same page. Do you not get fed by the wife, Irving? All right. I think this is, we can live with this funny comment from Rachel today. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Rachel, I know you're joking, so. All right, guys, I think it was a pleasure to be with you today, again, like each Sunday. And I'm gonna stop here and listen to Rachel, because that was a good one, Rachel, says Duke. All right, guys, I hope you had a wonderful rest of the day. And of course, I'm gonna see you here next Sunday. All right, see you guys, and thank you for being here with me this long time.